Okay, so let's dive right in. What we're going to explore today is a pretty radical reinterpretation of spiritual history. The source material we're looking at, well, it really flips the script on everything we thought we knew about scripture, worship, and our relationship with the great souls of the past. And right out of the gate, we're hit with this bombshell of a claim. The source asserts that in his 3 years of activity, Jesus didn't really have disciples in the formal sense. Instead, he just had people who followed him, people who gathered to listen. The point is, it wasn't about building some big institution. It was about individuals on their own journey. And that one little idea just blows everything wide open, doesn't it? If the very origin story is different from what we've been told, you have to wonder about the entire 2,000-year-old structure that's been built on top of that foundation. So that brings us to the first major point here, which is a fundamental challenge to the authenticity of religious texts themselves. The argument is that the holy books you might have at home, they aren't direct transcripts from the source, not even close. They're described as creations, works that were compiled, interpreted, and written down long, long after the events happened, not by the main figures, and not even in their lifetime. And this timeline really puts that into perspective. You see Jesus' ministry and death, and then this huge gap. We're talking 50 to 70 years of silence before the Gospels were actually written. According to this view, they were pieced together from stories, oral traditions, and maybe even rumors that had been passed down for generations. And it argues Jesus himself never wrote a thing because he couldn't read or write. So if the books are later creations, what about the original message? Well, this line of thinking leads to an even more startling assertion about the core teachings of these figures. You see, according to this perspective, these great teachers weren't trying to start a religion. They weren't going around demanding that people believe in them. Their purpose was actually much simpler, much more direct. They were just responding to people, answering the questions they were asked, and offering guidance to those who were looking for it. Now, to make this idea really hit home, the source boils it all down to a single stark number. Just one. Think about that. The argument is that if you stripped away all the later interpretations, all the commentary, and all the stories written by others, the actual pure essence of what Jesus or Buddha themselves said would fit on a single sheet of paper. Everything else, the thousands of pages, is built around that tiny core. Now, this is where the whole interpretation takes a really surprising, and for some, a pretty uncomfortable turn. It makes us question the very act of worship. So the idea here is that our devotion, all the prayers from millions of people over centuries, has an unintended side effect. This immense collective energy of us clinging to them creates a kind of spiritual tether. It's like an anchor that keeps these great souls bound to this earthly plane, preventing them from moving on and completing their own spiritual journey. And this quote, wow, it just reframes the whole relationship. It suggests that our constant prayers for help, our dependence, has accidentally created a spiritual prison for the very souls we look up to. Instead of helping them, we've been holding them captive with our own needs. So, if the old way of worship is a cage, then the big question is, who holds the key? The source material proposes a very specific answer. It argues that a new responsibility falls to a group it calls humanity's heirs. And that brings us to this key term, Chensan, which means descendants of heaven. The source uses this term to specifically identify the Korean people, positioning them as the ones who are meant to inherit and process all the wisdom that humanity has gathered so far. Now, this capacity, or mass, as the source puts it, is presented as totally unique. The argument is that this group has the ability to absorb the whole shebang of human knowledge, the Bible, Buddhist sutras, you name it, and synthesize it without, and I'm quoting, going crazy. The source then connects this special quality to their national history, enduring incredible hardship and then achieving meteoric growth, framing it all as part of a historic mission. And all of this leads to a final, radical shift in our spiritual purpose. It's about moving away from asking for help and moving toward taking action. The central call to action is blunt. Stop praying for help. Stop begging. The time for that is over. The idea is that humanity has grown up, and it's time to stand on our own 2 feet. And this comparison just lays it all out. The old path was about worship and clinging to the past for support. But the new path? It's about gratitude. It's about seeing their sacrifices as the fertilizer that has allowed us to grow. The best way to honor them isn't to pray to them. It's to use the foundation they gave us to build something incredible. Because ultimately, the source argues that our success is their liberation. When we take all that wisdom and use it to create a better, more peaceful world, when we ourselves start to shine, that's what finally unburdens those great souls. Our light makes their sacrifice meaningful, and it's what finally sets them free. And so we're left with this final, really provocative thought to chew on. What if our responsibility isn't to be followers who just preserve the past, but to be inheritors who build a future so bright that it justifies every single sacrifice that came before it?